to sell it to you.
What do you think about that?
Well, it's a position that I'm taking. I'm basically assuming that I'm going to sell it to you today for 10, and I'm hoping that in the future I can buy it for 8. So I'm taking the view the price of that house is going to go down. When it does, I'm going to be able to buy it and then deliver it to you. That's going short. I'm making a bet that the price of something goes down.
Why is it so popular?
Well, because it's just as popular as someone making a bet that something's going up. And, prices go up and they go down.
I think someone should invent a new game that we can all play like Monopoly, except that it involves short selling and selling long and credit default swaps and all this, so people can learn this.
Yeah, maybe we could come up the B&B trading game.
Would you? I'll market it. Let's go.
It's fun.
And you know what? I'm going to bet that it's going to be successful.
I'm afraid we've missed the Christmas season now.
That's okay.
I don't know, Betsy. You want to make a B&B board game?
Right. Quite sure how creative I'd be on that.
Call the Rainmaking company for that, okay?
Yeah, one of the characters, like in Monopoly, and you always wanted to be the shoe or something. We'll have to come up with, I want to be the chair or the dollar bill.
So how does short selling get into or connect with the credit default swap market?
Well, short selling, when people talk about short selling, it's generally a term that's used in the equity markets, where you sell stock that you don't own. And you sell it, let's say, I'm going to sell to you, I'm going to sell IBM stock to you, but I don't own it, and hoping that I can buy it at a lower price and then deliver it to you, making a bet.
I think that as you just explained that, not to interrupt you here, what you just described to me outside of your field sounds so exotic to me. I can sell something I don't own. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You know how it could sound from people on the outside? I'm going to sell you a country or a tree or whatever, right?
That I don't own. I know. It does all sound pretty exotic.
It's pretty exotic. Pretty wild.
I think the thing that we all have to remember is that every day we make bets.
That's true.
And when we invest our money and we buy IBM stock, we're making a bet that it goes higher. When we've got our pension, we've got our 401k, we've got some options, we can invest it in emerging markets, we can invest it in treasuries, we can invest it in the equity markets. Every time we make those decisions, we're making bets, it goes higher. And, there's a lot of cases, the markets work because there's someone who believes it's going higher and there's someone who believes it's going lower. And generally, it's a zero-sum game. When I sell something to you that I don't own, then, I could lose money on it. I could equally make money, but you were happy to buy it at the price that you bought it, so it doesn't really matter. However, to bring it back to your original question, how does short selling relate to derivatives? Well, if I buy protection on IBM, but I don't actually have any exposure to IBM, I am betting that IBM will deteriorate. I'm not necessarily betting that they're going to go bust because that's a pretty low probability bet to make that IBM is going to go bust. But I'm betting that today I can buy credit protection on IBM for 10, and I'm betting that tomorrow price goes up. So maybe I can turn around and get out of my contract and make some money on it. The price has gone up. Making a bet. And the concern about that is that if enough people make a bet that IBM is going to deteriorate, then it pushes price for credit protection for IBM, makes it really high, and it makes it more expensive for IBM to borrow money because the credit derivative markets are linked to the price of borrowing money for entities.
That was very well explained. That's why I asked the question, because I really feel that the audience needs to understand how this all interrelates. The interesting thing about it is that a company can be really running their business brilliantly and can get into this area, and other people can start short selling their stocks, let's say. Can a company get into trouble, even if it's making money in this process?
Well, I don't know, Betsy, you may have a view on this as well, but for most companies, it's have to be a huge number of people, players in this market, who are prepared to bet against them. If, the concept that few individuals or a few hedge funds could make enough bets actually push a company into bankruptcy, I think is a real stretch of the imagination. We're talking about, most American corporates are huge, huge institutions. They borrow billions and billions and billions of dollars every year. And the fact that, one hedge fund could decide to try and push one of these corporates into bankruptcy because they make the price of them borrowing money so high, so exorbitant, that they can't borrow anymore. It's a real stretch. In fact, Betsy was a salesperson covering hedge funds for part of in her former life.
Betsy, we didn't know you had many lives, but we want to welcome your feline soul to its rainmaking time.
Yeah. And Tara makes a really good point. Ultimately, with the regulation that passed this week in the U.S. about the bans on selling or the naked shorts, as Terry was describing in the equity market, you can't sell a stock short if in one day's time it's gone down 10%. In the market was passed, but it was not unanimous. It was 3-2 by the SEC. And ultimately, the whole crux of the opposition or the other side, the non-bipartisan side, saying was there's really no empirical data that's saying, yes, there are rumors about Lehman, but just because investors shorted Lehman stock didn't mean that they actually made them go bankrupt. As Terry pointed out, it was their funding. The fact that they couldn't fund themselves over a short period of time is extremely detrimental. Same analogy works in the credit default swap market. Yes, there's disruption in the fact that, yes, if you have a lot of investors shorting IBM risks or whatever particular risk, it may put some dampening on the cost and increase the cost of how they fund themselves. But I shouldn't need money, and hedge funds in no stretch of the imagination have enough capital to actually move a market for that extended long period of time in order to make it that detrimental. Greece comes to mind because there are a lot of articles in the paper, FT, Wall Street Journal, New York Times, whatever you read, that really is saying the credit default swap market is making it very expensive for Greece in its sovereign market to actually fund itself. And there's a lot of concern that because credit default swaps can allow investors to hedge themselves or go short risk, it's now making it expensive for Greece to borrow money. In essence, it's expensive for Greece to borrow money because they do not have their balance sheet in order. And so for those institutions who are exposed to Greece, it is very disconcerting that they don't have their balance sheet in order. Now, we're going to get into a circular argument, which comes first, the chicken or the egg, the credit default swap or the funding and the deficit. All of those are interrelated, and I don't want to put any blame or any stigma on any one of those, but to say that credit default swap market could make a sovereign potentially put a moratorium on their debt or not to be able to issue debt, we'd really have to look at the size of their GDP and the fact that the notional outstanding of credit default swaps is a fraction of that, and really try to come up with some empirical data, which was never come up with in the equity market. I highly doubt it would be possible to come up with a credit default swap market, but yet to be seen what professors or